Welcome to the Node.js Diagnostic Working Group meeting 28th October 2020. To start with other announcements.
Yeah, I mentioned it last time, but I'm working on a rewrite of promise hooks in V8 to use JS functions instead of C++ functions. So making good progress on that.
Stephen, I'm sorry, I missed that part. Can you please repeat?
Yeah, I'm doing a rewrite of the promise hook API in V8. So it currently uses C++ functions, which crosses the barriers a bunch. So I'm rewriting it to use JS functions. So it should be quite a bit faster. I've made some pretty good progress on that. I have it basically working as long as it doesn't turn on the optimizer. So just working on figuring out how to get it to work with the optimizer now.
Okay. So we should go with the regular agenda as tagged with the diagnostic agenda. But last week, we had a mention about the deep dive documentation because it has been quite some time. If I understand correctly, it has been 4 weeks. We did not touch the deep dive document. The last time we reviewed the deep dive documents, we asserted that it's kind of complete with respect to the coverage and scoping. Of course, there is no point in time where document can be deemed as complete in all aspects. There would be always running improvements that can be realized and new tools and new methodologies that come in. So that way there is no complete end to anything. So as much as complete, we should be striving to look at publishing this content externally. So that's a major chunk of work that is pending. All the good work which we did so far is fulfilled only if it is externally visible and consumed by the real users. So towards that effect, I think a discussion we can have on the lines of who wants to volunteer for which section and what kind of work needs to be carried out in each of the top level modules or topics or headers. That was a kind of discussion which I was hoping to have today before any other items. Unfortunately, I don't have the link to the deep dive documents, and I realized that we don't pin it anywhere. So at this point, without Mary in the meeting, we can't have that discussion. But without actually touching the document, the things which I believe we should be doing is reviewing the content, define based on any changes that may come up when you actually try out these tools in a real anomaly use case, fill in any sort of gaps, and then reformat for the markdown stuff that is required for the external content, and then publish. That's the kind of breakup work that's required for each of these top level content. We have some examples which are contributed by some of us in this working group in the documentation folder of this repo. If anybody wants to have a look and familiarize themselves with. So having said that, okay, let me promote Michael. So having said that, any thoughts, any suggestions, or any ideas, or any volunteers to take part in this work?
Sorry, I joined it after the conversation, so I am a little lost. Lost. It's about what issue?
So basically, over the last many months, we went through the various possible diagnostic scenarios and did a deep dive on each of the scenarios. We came up with a user journey on each of these use cases by identifying the most recommended tool and traveling from the actual problem context to the resolution with the help of the usage of the tool as well as the various best practices and methodologies. So that's essentially the deep dive document. As I said, unfortunately, I don't have the document link right now to actually do a demo or a walkthrough that on that. So that technically the work is complete with respect to the scope and coverage. What is pending in that is validating each of the top level user journey, probably with the actual tool or doing some hands on and make sure that what is written is actually possible, is actually makes sense, and then do some refinements. For example, in some cases, we would have written just one liner or a short form, would need some expansion, probably with some screenshots or some code snippets or some call stack traces, what is actually relevant for the scenario. And then we would need to format it for the external publication, um, most probably in a MD Markdown format. That's the actual work that is required.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if I can find that doc. That's not the right place.
So I'm just trying to, meanwhile, I'm trying to share the screen.
I think there's several of them, right?
I'm sorry.
There's a number of different docs that we did it in. So like, I think that's one.
That's what I was confused. As far as I know, there is a single large monolithic document. But when I searched, I also got a single document which covers one user journey item alone. So I'm a little bit
Okay.
confused on that front. Did you paste anything in the chat window?
Yeah, I pasted this. I'll paste again. Maybe the same thing that you found though, right?
I pasted another document, but I don't sure if it is about this journey that you sent, but it's the same, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so looks like it's per anomaly or per problem symptom.
Yeah, we kind of worked through them that way, so it would make some sense. Although these are all created by, I would have expected some of them would have been created by Mary. So
If I remember correctly, this was originally created by Peter,
Okay.
then carried over by Mary. So maybe in between the transition or somewhere, the monolithic document had been split into various documents based on the symptoms. It's my guess. I don't know. But anyway, if I take an example of browser crash as a representative um, deep dive candidate, I'm sure the same structure is followed in the rest of the cases as well.
Maybe if we had like a doc which had the link, the categories and the links to each one, and then a place to put somebody's name beside it as somebody who's working on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, I think, I'm looking within our team to have, in the next couple sprints, have somebody who can help write one of them up. If you have any time, and if we have any other people time, maybe we can make progress on a few of them.
I'm just wondering where would be the right place to make that table. If I do it in the current issue for this week, that's a transient issue which will get closed. We need a permanent place where that.
Yeah, we have an issue already for. Let me just look in the. Wondering if any of our existing issues make sense.
I used to maintain one issue. Not sure it got closed.
There's even like 295. It's marked as never stale.
And there is one 254 that has a table actually, but it's quite old.
Yeah, so that's probably the exact one where we should update that table, have the links to the best practice, like the deep dives that we've done. And I guess even links to because we've agreed on some of the section names, right? Because we did start writing some of them.
Yeah.
So that seems like the right one. Maybe in the the very first comment or the description versus another comment at the end, so that when you go to it, you see where we're at. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yes, it makes sense, because being the tracker issue, in the first comment, we can add a link to the one or many of the deep dive documents, and we can reuse the same table for tracking the work.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so that we make sure that we don't lose track on the past work performed by others, and we have a single source of truth. All right, so I suggest everybody to have a look at this, and for reference, please have a look at the documentation folder to understand the past work and the prior art on this particular thing. As soon as I get the link to all the Google Docs, I will put it in the first comment of issue number 254. And then please mark your name against any of the deep dive which you are interested to progress on. Of course, if there are technical challenges in making use of the tool, validating the content, and any sort of amendments that is required or proposed, we can always deliberate in this working group. We can actually make it a teamwork. So all right, any questions on this?
The table is have the past work is placed on the diagnostic documentation, and we need some people to work on profiling and tracing, right?
Profiling and tracing. Yeah, V8 profiler is an open item.
Okay.
Trace events is an open item. Yeah, it essentially
This
means that is a valid identified user journey, and there would be an entry in one of the deep dive documents. We just need to convert that section in the Google Docs to a format that is visible in the documentation folder of the repo.
okay. The profiling is not related to 148 issue about the profiling around the Linux or cross-platform. So we can add it to the recommendation folder the some paths to the bug found on this issue also.
I think so.
Okay, I guess I
Which
can
issue number you said?
148.
CPU profiling roadmap. Okay. So part of it would have been covered in the deep dive, but keep in mind that the deep dive documentation would have mostly followed the user journey based on the existing stable documented capability of the tool, what the tool has to offer, plus in addition to some of the best practices and methodologies. So I believe that the roadmap, CPU profiling roadmap, would be a superset of that. It would cover existing capabilities as well as the desired capabilities for production scale deployments and their problem determination. So there could be gaps.
Okay, I get it.
But the current documentation would probably stick to the existing capabilities and the best practices. All right, so let's go with the regular agenda. First one is 35534, add span API to diagnostic channel. Stephen?
Yeah, nothing new on that. Still just waiting for review. I don't expect to get much until after the core diagnostics channel stuff lands.
Okay. The next one is 35532, make diagnostic channel async iterable.
Yeah, it's same thing there. Needs feedback review, but don't expect to get much until diagnostic channel itself lands.
And the next one is 35286, which is marking async resource and async local storage as stable.
Yeah, so I believe we pretty much came to the consensus that async resource can probably be marked stable. And async local storage, we wanted to let it sit for a bit, and so we need to define some exit criteria, which I haven't really got around to yet.
I have placed a set of criteria which I kind of collated from various other modules which exited experimental the last couple of years. I just pasted the comments pertinent to that.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to look at that? I'm not claiming that this is 100% foolproof and it's 100% contextual to the specific module which we are talking about, but it would give a high level reference or a ballpark checklist to start with.
Yep. Yeah, I saw the comments. Haven't really taken the time yet to go through and like map that to like what this conceptually means for async local storage itself. Because like a bunch of that is kind of high level, so need to just kind of go through and figure out like, does it have this? Is this relevant in this case? Those sorts of things. Just haven't had the time to deal with that yet.
Yeah, I ideally these are some sort of a checklist. If you are in a commercial software that is being released, considered for release, what are the kind of things which you will look at? Like the API interfaces are well defined. There is enough coverage for various platforms which you are supporting, and test coverage. Do you have serviceability capability and the confidence of debugging the issues if they occur in the production? Is the API well documented? Are there evidence of this API or the feature that is being used in the field? Are there frameworks or NPM modules which are abstracted on top of this feature? These are the kind of questions which usually happen. And then what is the CI story around this module? Are there a lot of flake tests? Are there a lot of tests that are being skipped? What is the overall confidence from the test team? I mean, these are the general things. But in addition to that, there could be some specific issues which are concerning to the module itself.
Yep. Yeah, I just need to find the time to go through. Like I have like a general idea of like what the test coverage is, but I need to have a look and verify and all that sort of thing. Haven't got to it.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the actual procedure to propose for exiting experimental, but if I think loud, it would be like a PR, which proposes the actual changes that takes it to exit the experimental with the refined checklist in the first comment of the PR, with each of the checklist being selected by reviewers or the proposer itself. I'm not sure about that. The OP would leave the checklist open and the reviewers will come and say, yes, I'm good with this item. I check on it, kind of thing. Is that how it works, Michael?
Like I think for the past ones, like for an API, we agreed on in an issue, we agreed on here was the checklist that we thought made sense. And then when it came time, when we thought we'd satisfied all those, we opened the PR, and that PR reference to like here was the checklist that we approved. Here's the explanation how we've met each of those, and therefore it's ready.
Okay.
So I would try and get like that checklist documented and, advertise best we can, with the goal that when you do open the PR to say go to stable, everybody's like, yeah, okay, that's the checklist. Oh, you've met all those things. Yeah, okay, then it's ready to go. Right.
Okay. So basically, we define the checklist, we assert that these checklists are met, and then go with the PR with the checklist. And the
Yeah.
reviewers agree that, yeah, these are the right things to be checked, and we see that these are all achieved. And if they are not happy, they ask that questions.
Right. It's like a regular PR review at that point, right? With the reference to the checklist saying, it's ready to become non-experimental because of these reasons. People are always free to say, well, what about this or that? But in a lot of cases, people look at it and say, yeah, okay, that was thought through. That seems reasonable. I've now done the technical review of the code that's itself. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And it often included a list of, so for example, I know there is a PR that's being worked by Le Jindicas to fix up one of the cases for, context local storage and an API. So we, in the case of, I think, worker threads, we had a list of 3 or 4 of those kinds of things, which like, here are issues we knew were existing. We should check those off before we would propose it being experimental as well. And, in this case, Bradley raised a few issues. So I think those issues would be called out, and then you can have we've discussed them and agreed that it's okay, or, and that could be like, and it's fine the way it is, or it could be, no, we need to do something first or whatever, but like something that says they were actually addressed in terms of a concern.
Yeah. So in this case, I guess the immediate next step is for Stephen to refine this list based on the actual ground reality and repost this checklist in the same issue beneath, and for us to have a look at that and see, have a discussion around that and make sure we all agree on that, and then go with the PR.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I'll try to find some time for that soon-ish, hopefully.
Okay. The next one in the list is 34895, create diagnostic channel module.
Yeah, so it's currently blocked on TSC approvals because it's a top-level module. It needs 2 TSC approvals to be able to land.
Right. I'm just thinking, like, is it due to discussion that still needs to be resolved, or just lack of?
No one from TSC has interacted at all, really.
So I'm going to tag it for the TSC agenda.
But I already mentioned it in the TSC issue, just to hopefully bring it up. Yeah, just getting a mention of, like, yeah, that this is blocked on TSC reviews. Please have a look at this if you have time. Pretty much all that's needed.
Okay. Yeah, I will put that actually in the doc because that makes it less likely for me to forget.
Was this presented in a TSC a couple of months back, if I remember correctly?
There might have been some discussion on it, I think.
Maybe, not sure. It was mentioned at the last one.
No. Did you, Stephen, personally attended TSC and presented this issue?
No, I haven't presented it.
Does
it make sense, Michael?
I guess the question is it controversial? Like, is there, I'd have to go back and read it. Like if it's just we should do this, everybody agrees we should do this, we just need more reviews, then not necessarily. If it's something where the TSC needs to better understand why, that kind of stuff, then yes.
There's not really any like controversy in the PR. It's got like several approvals and everyone seems to be basically positive about it at this point. There was some like earlier controversy just with some of the other components, which is why I pulled them out, the like async iterable and the span API.
Right.
The current stuff seems to be uncontroversial. The only stuff that was never entirely resolved was some comments from James and like really early in the PR about just naming of things. He made some comment that like the module could maybe be called like diagnostic hooks instead to fit with the other like perf hooks and async hooks naming, but then like never responded since then.
Okay, so the section in particular, which is the file, I'm just looking at the one that actually needs TSC versus anything else, right? Like it's that there's a new top level module named Diagnostics channel, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've added that.
Yeah, so like Mary brought up that according to our process, top level modules need TSC approval.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that I do have like the namespace is already taken by me in NPM, so it's not like clobbering someone else's module or anything. So it's not really a worry that it's gonna break anybody. But yeah, just according to our process, we need to bring it up with the TSC.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just taking those notes. So basically, it's on the agenda because it's new top level module. You own the namespace, so there's no risk of collision. So if there's unless there's some additional discussion that comes out of that, it should be please approve, or if you have concerns, let's discuss them. I think my take will kind of be like, I'll go ahead and approve it unless somebody is saying there's a reason not to. And we need how many approvals, right? We need, I guess right now, yeah, we have no TS. We have James, so okay.
Well, we don't technically have James because the approval from James was a misfire and was never undone. So we do actually need 2 TSC approvals.
Okay. I know you had another discussion around like creating a separate experimental namespace, but that's probably best to keep as a separate discussion, right?
Yeah, there's been a couple different discussions around like creating some sort of like experimental namespacing thing. Near the end of that issue, there was another discussion about there's now like the node prefix thing. There's talk about like putting that behind the node prefix, but that only works in ES modules currently, so it need to be added to CommonJS. And it seems that we decided that adding that feature to CommonJS shouldn't block this. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Okay. That sounds good.
Okay. So the next one is 11893, which is Node.js internal script should be hidden in the inspector. I guess Mary knows the status of this. I can see one PR getting landed. But not sure whether the PR completely addresses the actual concern or in its actual spirit. For example, the original ask is the internal scripts belonging to the core module should not be visible in the inspector, either in the form of call stacks or in the form of in the time when the inspector traverses through the script. So the question is that completely achieved? By reviewing the PR 35498, I'm not sure that is actually addressing the same concern as it is. So I guess unless somebody else have a better insight, we will leave it for the next instance where Mary may have a better insight on this.
Yeah, makes sense.
All I know is we brought that one up last time, and yeah, there was like some open PR, but Mary said that there's still like some missing aspect of it, but I don't remember what that was. So yeah, as you said, I think we need to just continue waiting for Mary.
Yeah. On the other hand, as the team or as the working group, it's worthwhile to ask among ourselves whether, I mean, this level of requirement, is it anywhere featuring in our production pain points? Was there any user feedback on these aspects? Or the current PR would suffice for most of the diagnostic needs? Maybe can have the discussion when Mary is in. The next set in the agenda is 437, which is identify async hook use cases beyond async local storage.
Yeah, so I opened that last time, like after the last meeting, just because like the later issue, the async hook stable API tracking issue, has been in the agenda for probably literally over a year now, and it seems to be the consensus that async hooks, at least in its current form, is probably never going to be stable. So we're trying to identify like what are the things other than async local storage that we can layer over top of async hooks to make async hooks itself irrelevant, hopefully. So people can get the APIs they actually want, not some like fairly low level thing, which unfortunately exposes too much internals. And like low level APIs are fine so long as they aren't exposing internals like that. So yeah, just trying to map out what are the things that people want to use async hooks for, and identify how can we like distill that down to some API ideas, like new ways that we can interface with these parts of the system to present an API that's a little more useful for the particular purposes and safer. So there's been like a couple comments in there, and we've so far come up with the use cases that like we need long stack traces for various purposes. So we need to be able to have a way to like get the init event at least to gather that. There's like tracking handle lifecycle, trying to identify if we need like direct access to the resource object or if it's sufficient just having the type. And another use case was measuring time spent in blocking code. So being able to like store a timestamp at the init and making some measurements later and reporting that somehow. So it's so far seems like the init is at least required, at least at a like more higher level than exists right now, for the purpose of like getting the type and like storing timestamps and things like that. The later things could maybe be internalized more. It's like if we had an API, there's like whenever an init happens, we can like stick a timestamp on, like to say like this resource should be using this timestamp. We could have like an API that like we currently have like execution async resource. We could have something that's like set timestamp for this resource ID, and then like whenever it does the like internal bits of async hooks currently, it could like create the like let's process HR time timings from the like root time, and like emit those in like some other way that doesn't actually require exposing the like before and after hooks.
Right. Are they not candidates for the diagnostics channel?
Yeah, but potentially. I think the like measuring time spent in blocking codes, just because you want like a more complete measurement of like the whole system. I don't think that fully ports over like a lot of use cases.
Okay.
Like you could measure like I want to know how long the request took, but if you want to know like the overall timing of like the whole process, like Diagnostics channel I don't think should be reporting like every single thing.
Right. Okay.
It's a little bit more high level. So yeah, the measuring time spent in blocking code, you're going to be like putting that in like I want to just measure every single like async barrier basically. And Diagnostics channel doesn't want to concern itself with async barriers. It's just here's an interesting thing that happened, like an FS read happened, so MySQL query happened. Could have been like 100 other things in the middle there that didn't matter, but this might be relevant. And then yeah, tracking handle life cycles, same kind of thing. You want to know like more complete picture of exactly what things are like being held open. So yeah, I think all of these like are valid use cases for async hooks, and we should try to identify how to reduce those to more purpose-built APIs.
Right, or at least they help us understand, is there a way, I mean, maybe it's the same thing, but like, how would you expose that safely, right?
Yeah, so my goal with this issue is pretty much identify either like how do we make more abstract APIs that allow us to deprecate async hooks entirely, or can we like distill async hooks down to the things we actually need from it and just deprecate the parts that we don't need.
Right. Yep.
Like the unsafety of async hooks, like the entire API is not unsafe. It's certain aspects of it. It's like we are exposing the resource. That's the basic
right
unsafe part. The rest of it is basically fine. So if we could just not expose the resource anymore, just deprecate that as an argument, then I think that would be fine. But like it's also still slightly clumsy API, possibly. So if we do narrow down like what are the actual use cases for this, then we might be able to come up with APIs that are just better for the needs of our users.
Right. Yep. It sounds like, and this is a good first step, getting the use cases documented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just any more use cases we can add to this would help. If you know like anyone that's doing like obscure stuff with async hooks, we send them to this issue. Not sure if it'd maybe like eventually be worth like tweeting out about this, try to get like community input or something.
I think actually like even writing a blog post, which we would have posted to the Node.js Foundation Medium. So like a blog post that says, we've gotten some external input. Here are the use cases that we've already gotten. You know, we're looking at how we can tweak it or change it or replace it to get to something that won't be experimental. Give us your feedback, and then tweeting that out would probably make the most sense in my mind.
Yeah.
Because it gives some people like concrete, like here's ones, does my use case fall into this? Yes, okay. Don't have to worry. Oh, wait a sec, I'm doing something different, right? Let me better tell them.
Yeah, makes sense. The next one in the agenda is add IRDs to the problematic modules.md.
That's just waiting for another, like we were going to create some new file, and the last thing I read is it just says we'll leave this open until we've created that new one and move it there.
Yeah, so Mary was basically going to go through that existing file and break it up into separate issues for like each module. So like we have like actual issues to keep track of this rather than some file that everyone forgets exists. And we can like separate it into issues per module, so it can function more as like an actual tracking issue rather than just some like permanence recording of what the state is at some given point in history and not necessarily current reality. So there's modules in there that have been rewritten like several times since they were added to that document. So who knows if any of that actually still is accurate.
Okay. Next one is 148, which is Node CPU profiling roadmap.
I guess this issue can be skipped because the Mary has all the context and she is the champion of this work. So until she comes, we can add it to agenda to discuss about, because we have some lacks, but she have all the information, I guess.
Okay. And the last one in the agenda is 124, which is async hook stable API tracking issue.
Well, I thought we discussed, I forget whether closing or like I think we discussed closing that, and I don't know if Cord had volunteered to open one which better reflected the current status, which was not necessarily of trying to get it to stable.
Stephen, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
No, sorry, we're at the async hooks thing now.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, that's number 437, I guess, is kind of meant to replace this issue somewhat. So I don't know if there's anything else that still needs to be said for this one, but yeah, I'm of the opinion that async hooks as it is should never be stable. So we need to find a path to either making the changes to make it stable or replacing it with something else that can be stable.
Right. So I think we could just say closing that in favor of 437.
Yeah, sounds reasonable to me.
Done.
So instead of looking at stability for async hook, we look at wider use case for async hooks and try to achieve the stability through wider adoption or wider set of use cases.
It's basically, instead of focusing on making it stable, focus on understanding the use cases, how to satisfy those use cases, which could be like something completely different. Or it might take us back to making async hook stable, but it's not necessarily the path that we'll come out with.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm somewhat of the opinion that async hooks, as it is designed right now, was somewhat built with like a huge list of like many possible use cases in mind, and it kind of makes it just mediocre at everything. So if we just like put a little more thought into and like gathered feedback from the community into like what exactly are you doing with this and how can we do this for you better, we could just deliver more purpose-focused APIs that hopefully like don't have nearly the performance impact that async hooks does, and like would just be a lot friendlier to work with than like async hooks, which like for most of what I've seen people use async hooks for, it's pretty awkward to work with and like quite failure prone. There's lots of like weird edge cases in like event ordering and just like certain things won't emit certain events in certain cases, and you have to be aware that that's a possibility, and it's just it's really difficult for people to deal with safely sometimes. So yeah, just having something that actually does what you really need would be better, I think.
And even if we use it underneath the covers, like eventually not exposing it might be much safer and give us more flexibility for the future than exposing it as is.
Yeah, like I think like the majority of like certainly the C++ stuff would probably remain pretty much as it is right now, just because like it is currently being used by async local storage, and like async local storage will continue to need just like a bunch of the same things. There's like some of the C++ stuff currently is like not used there, but it might be used in other places. So yeah, I expect mostly that will remain the same. The JavaScript side of it might change a bit just as needs evolve. Yeah, there's like the JavaScript side of it does like a whole bunch of somewhat complicated stuff to try and massage this like one C++ interface into the like multi-tenant JavaScript interface, and there's like a lot of weird performance hackery to try and like synchronize between the two sides efficiently, and it's not really ideal.
Okay. All right. So that's the end of the list of agenda items. Anyone else
Okay.
have any other items to discuss? If not, that's the end of today's discussion. I'm going to hunt for the Google Docs for the deep dive user journeys and make the issue number 254 populated with the information about the user journey links as well as um, the table where you can have a review on the items and whichever items you are interested, you can register yourself or put your name against, and we can kickstart that work. Probably should target to complete in coming couple of months itself, and just putting some realistic targets so that we make some progress on that.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for joining.
Okay.
Talk to you in 2 weeks' time. Talk
Yep,
to you later.
bye.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.